Hi, everyone. In today's video, we're going to do a deep dive into some fun things you can do in Microsoft Word, either independently or in combination with a Gavel workflow. We're going to use the example of a limited scope engagement agreement that also has a letter. I've already built this particular workflow out, and it's actually the one we're using for my law students in legal tech access to justice fellowship. So you'll get to see a sneak peek of what they are building in that particular fellowship and some of the tips and tricks that I'm teaching them for Microsoft Word. So, the couple of things that we're going to go through are how to make it to where you have different rules for different sections of your document. So, this is really useful when you have sort of a package, you could say, of a template that involves multiple types of documents that have different starting points for page numbers or different rules for the headers and footers, things like that. So in our case, we're going to have two sections. We're going to have the letter section, and then we're going to have the limited scope engagement agreement section. The way that it's currently set up, we have a problem because this limited scope engagement agreement starts on page 3, and we need it to start on its own page 1 rather than being seen as a continuation of the letter. So we can do that by making sure we break it up into sections. And we also want to format these page numbers to where it says, instead of just page 1, page 2, we want to say page 2 or page 1 of, and then the section pages. So rather than the full amount of pages of the whole document, we want to just have it have Microsoft Word consider only the number of pages within that section. So we're going to do those two things first. And then I just wanted to highlight a couple of fun things that we did here with some repeating items and how you can format those with bullet points. And then also how to create really well formatted signature blocks and things like that using invisible tables. So those are some of the fun things we'll go over, and let's get started right away. So the first thing I will point out is that the way that this was rendering on the other side at first is that this page in between the letter and the limited scope engagement agreement was coming out empty, which is fine. I wanted it to be blank, but it does come out a little bit awkward if we don't have a message saying why it's blank. And the reason it is blank is that we have the idea that this might be printed out double-sided. So if it was printed out double-sided, you would want there to be a blank page between the letter and the agreement so that the agreement doesn't get printed on the back of the first letter page. So you would want there to be this first page printed on the front, this blank page printed on the back, and then this engagement agreement printing on its own first page. So that is the consideration and the reason for a blank page here. But I did feel it would be better if we had a little message that said this page intentionally left blank. So I'll show you how to kind of do this piece first, and then we'll break these into sections. So the first thing that you would do is make sure that you never work off of your most perfect template. So I always duplicate instead of working off of the original. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. We'll take off copy at the end and we'll make this version 2. And this is just for the example. So in this case, we'll work off of our new working version or version 2. And we can go here to this show hide for this paragraph, and that will show us the section break that's happening here, which is fine because I make sure that the limited scope engagement agreement always shows up on a new page. But we just want to add some text ahead of it. So let's go ahead and put our cursor here, and we're going to come down a little bit. And then I'm going to just put a little message that says, this page intentionally left blank. And then I'm going to bold this and center it. And let's go ahead and save this. Now it's a little bit low, but I'm going to put it where I would want it to end up in the middle of the page first. But then I'm going to just point out something really quick about conditional logic. So let's say we wanted it to end up here around this middle section here. What I would want to do is actually push it down 2 more spaces. And the reason for that is these 2 lines in green, this one here and this one here, are conditional logic that I've added using the document tagger from Gavel in order to make it to where this signature block will only show if the attorney's full name is Demi E. Demo. And so what's going to happen is this part here, this section right here, will move up to this line. And this line here will no longer show in the output document after it's run through the particular workflow that we've attached this to. Now, what we're going to do here then, because those two will go away and this will then get pushed up 2 lines, is that we want to actually push this down 2 more than we would actually want it to be. So we're going to go ahead and save that. So now we have a section here at the top of this letter. And we can do this also because we know that these other lines will not be affected or will not affect the placement because this line is the date, so it will stay on one line. These are a name and an email address that will stay on one line. The matter title should be short, so it should stay on one line. We have the title, which would be Mr., Mrs., etc. Somebody's last name, so that will stay on one line and won't push any of this other text down. The only thing that will affect the placement of this now would be this sort of conditional logic here. So if you had multiple signature blocks, you'd have to take those into consideration as well. But for now, here we only have these 2 lines that we would want to push down. Now, if we go on to the next, which would be formatting our page numbers for each section, if we note what we're trying to do is make it to where firstly, we want all of the pages to say something like page something of something, being section numbers. So that would apply to all pages. So we can do that while they're still linked together. So let's do that now. So if we go to the first page of this particular document, we come down to page 1. What we can do is we can click into the footer here and put our cursor here around page number. So page 1 and go on to the other side of 1 and then say of. And what we're actually going to do is insert a field. And the field is going to be in the category of numbering. And we're going to have the field name be section pages. And it's important that you use section pages rather than section because section is inserting the number of the current section, which means that it would always show if I put this here as 1, no matter what, because it's considering section 1. And we want it to be section pages, which is the total number of pages in the section. So we want to put in section pages. And what we'll do here and what we'll see is we have page 1 of 2, page 2 of 2, page 3 of 4, because there's 2 pages in section 1 and 4 pages in section 2. Oh, sorry. 2 pages in section 1 and 4 pages in section 2, where section 2 is referring here to the limited scope engagement agreement. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is unlink section 1 from section 2. We want these to be independent from each other so that we can make changes to one and leave the other alone. So what we'll do is, if you notice here, it says same as previous in this header section 2, which means that this is going to copy always what came before it in the section before it. So I want the headers to always be the same. I don't mind this like this. I think it looks fine. And I only want the footers to be unlinked. So we can keep this header linked, but we want to change the footer and unlink it. So what we're going to do is, if you notice in the footer for section 2 on the first page here, we're going to click into this, and where it says same as previous, we want that to go away. And the way that you can do that is going up to your toolbar. If you come all the way here, make sure you're in header and footer. And if we scroll to here, you'll see that this button here is pushed in already by default, which it says link to previous. Now, a lot of the time you want this to be pushed in because you're usually working on a single document where you want everything to be seamlessly linked together. But in our case, we have 2 documents in one. So we want to unlink them. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. And that makes it to where we can make changes within the footer here for this section 2 and not affect anything in section 1. So I'll show you an example of this. So if I went ahead and deleted something here, like took this out, for example, you see that it doesn't change anything in section 1. So what that means is when I come over here and I could have done this while they were still linked, but I want the section pages to not get messed up too. So what we're going to do here is have this number restart at 1. Restart the page numbering at 1. So we can click on here, and then when we go to header and footer, we're going to go over here to page number, go down to format page number, and under page numbering, we're going to say start at 1. Okay. So now what we have is 2 independent sections, section 1 and section 2, where the letter has its own separate footer that has a page number and out of it section number pages. So we have 2 pages in section 1. We also have this in page intentionally left blank, and then in our limited scope engagement agreement, we have the page 1, starting at page 1 of 4, and that is referring to the number of pages within the section that encompasses the agreement. So that is how you can do that. And then I just wanted to, before we move on, to show you a couple of other things while we're in here. So one of the cool things that we've done in this section is something that I use a lot, which is invisible tables for precise formatting. So what I mean by this is actually a table rather than text. And the reason for that is specifically around the ability to control some of the sizing and keep everything sort of together. And so you can't see it because I've taken off all of the borders. And this is a trick that we use a lot as Gabble experts. So what I can do is show you. So when you click on this, you'll now be able to see these like table design and layout buttons. And what you'll be able to see is this borders button, which is really important. Now, what you can do is what happens is normally a table where you say like insert a table, etc. It looks like this. It will have all of these borders showing by default. Now you can change that default by going to table design, borders, and saying no border. Now, if you wanted to change some of the things within here while it's invisible, you could say, or it doesn't have any borders, you can actually do this thing called view grid lines. So if you click on view grid lines, you'll be able to play with this and sort of see where the borders are without having to have the borders on with the actual sort of black or other color. Now, one of the things I'll point out that is useful to know is that you are able to change the spacing around here as well. So we were able to make it to where all of these texts are flush with the edge of the table. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is by default, when you insert a table like this, then it's going to be pushed in slightly. And when I say it, I mean text. Text is pushed in slightly by default, as you can see here. So if there was something that appeared above this, some text like this, it's off kilter a little bit. So what you can do is make it to where when you click into here, you can just move this over using your ruler up here at the top. And then you can do the same thing here. So when you're doing something like a signature block or something like that, and you want it to be like the signature here, and then everything else is underneath it, you can utilize this kind of configuration in order to make sure that it looks flush like this. And then you can use that sort of trick where you now make this invisible by using the borders and saying no border. And now it looks like this. So that is how you can play with some Microsoft Word tricks regarding. Now we've gone over a couple things. So we've added some text above the next page line. We've added page 1 of and then section pages, and we've made it to where we've unlinked section 1 from section 2 so that we can have multiple independent documents within a single document. The last thing I wanted to show you really quickly is the ability to do something fun with repeating items, which is bullet points. So when you have a repeating item in your workflow, in my case, I have one in a section where we are saying what the scope of the services are. So I have one that is the client is going to have the lawyer perform these services, but not these services. And I don't know in each one in advance exactly how much I'm going to do. So I want this to be a repeating item that I can tailor to my needs for that particular one. So a repeating item, if we look on the back end of this particular workflow, in our case, looks like this, where we have these are the services within the scope of the agreement. So this is a line item of services of text that you will be doing, and then this is one that you will not be doing. So what that looks like on the other side, and as we run this, for example, let's just use my name as an example of the client's name. And this is the attorney that we've chosen. This is the matter title. This would be the services within the scope of the agreement. So what we're trying to do is make it to where there are bullet points for each one. By default, what happens is when you are using, let me just pause for a second. So I've just signed into my Word add-in for Gavel here, this document tagger one, which you can get easily from the add-in store if you go to developer, add-ins, and just search in the store for Gavel here and just say add. You can also do this by inserting add-ins here, get add-ins. So either way, you can get to this store. Either way, so once you've installed this and you've connected your API key to it from the dashboard here, let me just show you quickly. You would create this API key going to your settings like this, and then just create one here, and then link that to your document tagger. Then once that's all set up, and you have a repeating item in your workflow, you'll be able to choose your workflow from your dropdown, and you'll be able to now play with your repeating item. So what I wanted to show you is how to do the bullet point trick here. So what happens when you insert a repeating item, you can do it in multiple different ways. So one of the ways you can do that is a multi-line list, which means that each entry will appear underneath each other. So in our case, we can have a multi-line list that we insert. This is going to be services within the scope, and we have the option for with that are outside the scope. So if we add the attribute of the line item of services that will be performed, we can insert that field and it will look like this. So this is just the opening condition or sort of saying to the computer what we are putting here and from which question and variable. And then this is the actual line item of service. And so you can actually do some fun things with this. So I always want to make sure that the format from a paragraph sort of spacing perspective is exactly how I want it to be. So I usually like it to be single spaced here, just as like a formatting for myself to know exactly where the lines will be. And then I'm just going to put my cursor here, and you could give this numbering if you wanted to, or you can give it a bullet point. You can do a couple of different things with this, which is really fun. So now what's going to happen is that anytime that this workflow is run, these services will, as they're added, so let's say we have this first one, then that will appear on the first line, and then this will be underneath it on the second line if we have the second one, and then a third and fourth and fifth and whatever else. So that's pretty cool, and how that comes out at the end. So let's just kind of go through this and have this render something. And let's maybe add another here, test two, and actually let's go back and add another here. We can add another here or here, either way. So let's just do test, and then let's do another one on the second one. So we'll do this one, and we're going to add another one and this one. And I've already changed this within the actual workflow here to make all these changes. I just wanted to show you the changes sort of more visually on this side, but I've already uploaded them to my output documents over here. So we'll go ahead and go through this. And now we're at the review and confirmation page, which would then be emailed to the client to review and decide whether or not they agree to these terms. They can say no. If they do say no, they can continue and provide further details of what they would like to discuss. And at the end, they are given a copy of their answers, and one is emailed to the attorney. In this case, you can see the changes that we've made have been reflected here, which is that we have the invisible table that I showed you here. We now have page 1 of 2, where this is the first page of the letter out of 2 pages that constitute this page and the blank page, where we have this page intentionally left blank. We have then also the limited scope engagement agreement, which starts on page 1 and of 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4 of just the agreement, even though we're in a document that has 6 pages. And then we have the bullet points with the repeating items, where we have the 2 showing underneath each other. So that is pretty cool that you can do all these fun things in Word. And I think a lot of being good at using Gavel comes down to really your level of proficiency within Microsoft Word and your ability to kind of be strategic about how you utilize the tools that are available to you here and knowing what options are available to you. Even something as simple as this view grid lines, which I learned from Trisha Duffin, who is brilliant, and she showed me this cool tool here. So I think it's useful to spend some time kind of going through each button and getting to know what each thing does, so that you know what options are available to you as you're building out your different workflows and creating your template documents, which are really the foundation and base of everything that you do in Gavel. So, well, especially when you have documents attached to your workflows, which not all of them have. So when you're done making your changes, you would choose your file and then you would say open here, and then it would be added here. But I don't want it to be added to my template library right now. So I already have this one in here, but you can see my different documents here, and that's how you would do that if you wanted to. And if you had a PDF, you could unlock it and add it here as well. So that is my demonstration for today. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you in the next video.